Thanks for taking the time to sit down with us today. We're really keen to hear your opinion and your experience from fire in the last 30 years.
Yep, thank you. I'm excited about it.
So we've seen a lot of evolution in fire protection in the last few years. What is it about intumescent paint solutions that are pushing them to the front?
So historically, intumescent coatings has been quite expensive. So if you look at single-pack intumescents or even two-pack intumescent products in the 90s, because the intumescents originally come from the hydrocarbon industry. They were originally developed to protect oil and gas projects, both onshore and offshore.
Right.
So that the what we call the film thickness or the dry film thickness, which is the amount of product that is put on a steel member, for example, after it's dried, were quite significant. So a 60-minute rated steel beams in the early 90s were 4,000 to 6,000 microns. So a significant amount of product. It's not just the material costs, but also the labor costs.
Complex, expensive,
Yep.
new to market
Yep.
in the 90s, did you say?
Yeah, in the 90s.
Yeah.
But if you look at back from 1994 to 2024, what's happened is the performance of these products has been highly optimized. So what used to be 4,000 microns now is 200 microns.
Right.
So you basically have 5% of the amount of product on than you did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's obviously reduced the labor cost and also the cost on the material.
Mm.
The other thing is the raw materials and the manufacturing process has been refined. So the price per kilo in today's value is actually the same as it was 30 years ago.
Right.
So if you compare, and you can graph this out in the industry, if you look at the amount of, in the 90s, boarding, which boarding means putting plasterboard or magnesium oxide board around a steel member or a column, in the 90s, that was much cheaper than using intumescent coatings.
Yeah.
In the fact today, it's completely the other way around. So it's almost double the cost of trying to board something today compared to spraying intumescent. So if you look at Europe, for example, intumescent coatings on steel is actually 90% of the market share. And in New Zealand, it's getting very close to that now as well. Most of the projects will have intumescent coatings on the steel. Australia, a little bit less so because of it's a 2-hour fire rated market rather than the 60-minute market. So at that range of fire ratings, vermiculite or cementitious style spray, which we also have in our range, becomes more cost competitive than intumescent coatings.
Yeah.
But if you want exposed steel, you basically need to have intumescent coating on it.
And construction these days, obviously, are all about compliance and safety, but also environmental impact.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at boarding material, for example, you can't do that necessarily in an exposed environment. You might enclose the building before you start boarding and scribing, and that can have program delays. And program delays can be more costly than actually installing the product itself. So that's why I guess main contractors probably prefer intumescent, because you can coat them exposed, and with the right amount of with the right system, paint system, the product can actually stand exposed for years.
And time prefabrication seems to be a big shift in construction. Intumescent paints works into the prefabrication and offsites.
Yes, so we not all products, but we have the 2-pack epoxy products range that we have work with prefabrication. And that's something that is becoming more and more common, both in Australia and New Zealand. Obviously very cost effective, and you're reducing the risk on site. And also compliance is easily controlled from a QA point of view. But to your last point though, the environmental aspects, since we were the first one and still the only one in New Zealand that have a red list free products and declare. So we comply with the Living Building Challenge projects, which is one of the hardest environmental status to actually get.
Tell us a little bit more about the red list.
So red list is a list basically that contains harmful chemicals, and in our case, you could in theory actually drink our intumescent. Wouldn't recommend it. I haven't tried it. I probably should. but
Is that when Garage bring out a range of?
Yeah.
Maybe that's when.
Maybe the next microbrew would be a Fire Shield by Garage project.
But I think your wife looking for another project. Maybe she can start the drinkable intumescent.
Yeah, I'm not sure that everyone would sort of enjoy the taste of it though. It's kind of viscosity is quite high as well. It's pretty gross to drink. But the so in terms of a whole range, bar some solvent products that the market is still asking for, which we do still sell because some of the applicators wants to use it. But when you look at our main range being the single-pack water-based range, both for timber and steel, and the 2-pack epoxy, we are Green Star accredited, There's no odor, there's no solvents. You don't need to shut the building site down. And of course, from an architecture point of view, it's really favoured. I would say the contracting side in New Zealand and Australia are still quite a bit behind Europe. So a lot of the products that are being sold in New Zealand on the Intumescent range, you wouldn't be able to use in Europe at all. Right. Unfortunately, they still are in New Zealand, but I think with time they will change because the main contractors and the subcontract environment seems to be more worried about cost than harmful chemicals to their staff or to the environment itself. But having said that, though, in central environment in Sydney and Melbourne, you can't spray these products because of the solvent vapors, so you have to use our Green Star accredited products.
Right.
And that's something that we're unique with. So for the same cost, you can use an environmentally friendly product that are harmless to your staff. Why wouldn't you use that compared to the solvent alternative that costs us the same or more?
Yeah.
It seems a pretty obvious choice to me, but
You heard it here from Per Osson, the drinkable fire protection paint.
yes, yeah.
So I'm getting the gist that Fire Shield are kind of leading edge, always a step ahead, looking for the new solutions. Any particular solutions recently that you're proud of and you'd like to talk to us about?
I think one of the uniquenesses that we have internally is the fire testing and research that we've done to protect various building elements that normally you would use boarding for. So one area that we're the only one really that's certified in Australia and New Zealand to do is protecting heritage timbers. So particularly if you refurbish an older building, you would normally provide plasterboard, 2 layers of plasterboard below the ceiling. But of course, that conflicts the heritage requirement
Because it's beautiful elements of a timber building that you can no longer see.
you can't express it.
Yeah.
So our first project, which is an award-winning project, which was with Warren Amani in Auckland, 228 Queen Street. That was the first one that set this journey off, where we managed to expose the underside of the beautiful old timber, the timber joists, the timber floorboards, the timber columns by protecting the timber with our Intumescent for heritage timber specifically. So we managed to get a 60-minute fire rating out of that structure without using plasterboard. Not only was it cheaper, the main reason was actually to express the timber. And since then, we've done the Parliament House in New South Wales, the Art Gallery at Woolloomooloo in Sydney, and lately the Birkenhead Point with Mirvac, the old heritage shopping centre. So I think that's a really exciting area, and architects, and as well as for developers to get into these.
So happy client, happy Heritage Council.
It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's we're the only one that operate in that area, and we're continuing doing research. So what that has led to, consequently, is the encapsulation of CLT. So the fire regulations are continuously evolving in this area, but with larger commercial buildings, and particularly when you have stay-in-place strategies, you may be required to encapsulate part or all of the CLT.
This was a result of FENS New Zealand looking at structural elements of buildings and included them in the fire rating?
Well, actually, originally, it got started off by a lot of full-scale research in Europe that led to a global timber design guide that was published in New Zealand. That then, I guess, the councils and the fire service got their eyes on this, and the theory around the fire dynamics is correct, because a CLT building can obviously, in the wrong conditions, self-sustain burning. So even though you might have a fire rating on that particular element, you might need to protect it, which we call encapsulation.
Right.
Now, normally, naturally, you would use jib for that, couple of layers of plasterboard, but there's number of issues with that. One is it's weighing the whole building down, and when you're in a seismic environment, that means you need to complement it with a lot of more structural elements to it.
Yeah.
But secondly, it's quite expensive way of doing it in terms of scribing and all the details around the ceiling itself. It's easy in 2 dimensions, but in 3 dimension it gets harder. So
Once again, you're losing all the aesthetics of a timber building.
that's right. So we did and still doing quite a bit of testing around this and developing new products, but we have now products that can protect CLT structures, and we've used them particularly in the aged care industry in New Zealand. And that's another area where we are really evolving and changing. So,
Well, we've run out of time.
yep, thank you.
It's been great chatting with you.